Times Nightly News for Thursday, the 11th day of January 2018. Antigua and Barbuda is to establish a sexual offences court, the first of its kind in the OECS. The chief magistrate dismisses a newspaper article claiming it contains inaccuracies. Regionally, the U.S. categorizes Jamaica as a Category 2 on its travel advisory scale, and the European powers urge the United States not to abandon that limits Iran's nuclear program. Thank you so much for joining us this Thursday evening. I am Phil George. Antigua and Barbuda will be the first island within the OECS to establish a sexual offences court. The announcement was made this morning during the launch of the Model Guidelines for Sexual Offences Cases in the Caribbean region. While a date was not announced by which the court will become operational, Attorney General the Honourable Stedroy Cutie Benjamin says he has given the assurance that the government is committed to bringing the court to fruition in the shortest possible time and will provide the funding, human resource and technology to make it a reality. The Attorney General told the gathering of judges, magistrates and other legal luminaries that his government takes seriously the issue of sexual offence and will introduce legislation in Parliament to give support to the Sexual Offence Court and to victims of sexual crimes. The pieces of legislations to be tabled are a new Sexual Offences Act that will focus on sexual harassment, especially in the workplace, harassment of young girls and vulnerable victims. It will also focus on sexting. The second piece of legislation to be introduced will focus on vulnerable witnesses and young victims, including girls. The legislation will give victims of sexual offences the right to be heard in sentencing and a right to counselling after a sexual assault. The Attorney General underscored the importance of the proposed legislations, noting that persons may want to think twice about how they go about interacting with colleagues.
We're now coming into the modern 21st century. Rape is being redefined, and there's a bit different treatment. And one thing about the publication too is that men in the workplace and women will have to know to conduct themselves, because a small smile, a touch, words being spoken, the looks could all be deemed to be sexual harassment. So we have to have a sensitive program going forward to inform all persons how to behave themselves.
Minister Benjamin also revealed that under the second legislation, government will introduce the establishment of a sexual predator registry, which will list those who prey on young girls and boys. Antigua and Barbuda today became the fifth Caribbean country to launch the Model Guidelines for Sexual Offences Cases in the Caribbean region. The guidelines will provide internationally accepted best practices for the management of sexual offense cases and offers a rights-based approach to the treatment of complainants and vulnerable witnesses, including children involved in sexual assault cases. The guidelines form part of a comprehensive approach that seeks to address issues faced at the investigative, pre-trial and adjudicatory phases, as well as offenders' rehabilitation and management. Well, the $90 million port modernization project is set to begin next Monday and, when completed, will serve as the largest facility of its kind in the region. The project is being financed by the China Export-Import Bank, that's the Exim Bank, in the form of a 2% low-interest loan and a moratorium on repayment. It will involve 12 acres of new land. When the project is completed, a new container park, 2 cranes and other facilities that will make it the most attractive in the region. It will serve as a transshipment port expected to triple the cargo it now receives. According to Senator Mary Claire Hurst, chairman of the Antigua-Barbuda Port Authority, the development will be designed in 4 specific areas: a container terminal where loaded and empty containers will be discharged and loaded, a container freight station, locally referred to as a warehouse, a new and extended seawall, and the new multi-agency administrative building. As with most financing from the Chinese, the minister of Information, who is also the spokesperson of Cabinet, the Honorable Melford Nicholas, said there will be some Chinese workers involved in the project. He noted that for such a large project with attractive financing options, there must be some trade-offs in the agreement. Nonetheless, the minister advised that Antiguans and Barbudans will work alongside the Chinese, and invitations to apply for jobs have been issued. In other developments, this Thursday evening, the Chief Magistrate is rebuffing a recent article published in the Daily Observer newspaper describing it as inaccurate. The article of Monday, 8th January 2018, captioned "Chief Magistrate's Sentence Raises More Questions," detailed an attorney questioning the magistrate's sentence of a young man, Makiva Otto of Briggins, who was charged for being in possession of a gun and ammunition. He pleaded guilty to both charges and was fined $3,000 for firearm possession and $2,500 for ammunition possession, or 1 year in jail if he failed to pay the fines. In the article, an attorney is reportedly questioning the magistrate's decision of a fine instead of prison time, which is believed to be in contravention of the Firearms Amendment Act 2017, number 27 of 2017. But the Chief Magistrate in a statement outlined that the author's newspaper article is inaccurate. Joan Walsh outlined that the Firearms Amendment Act 2017, number 27 of 2017, was only printed and published in the official Gazette on Tuesday, 9th January, adding that until that time the Act was not formally law. Magistrate Walsh noted that the court can only make reference to that which is currently on the law books, and that it is left to the discretion of the magistrate as to the sentence to be passed down on a convicted person based on, among other things, the Probation of Offenders Act. The Chief Magistrate has advised the author of the article that a magistrate is not deemed to know that which is law until it has been printed and published in the official Gazette. The National Office of Disaster Services has taken steps to prevent stealing of hurricane relief items at its headquarters. Last weekend, following a routine inspection of the hurricane relief items donated to the government of Antigua and Barbuda, a number of items were discovered missing from the National Office of Disaster Services storage facility on American Road. Subsequently, the Ministry of Social Transformation conducted an investigation which resulted in 2 individuals being arrested and charged by police. To prevent a recurrence, Director Fillmore Mullin says surveillance equipment will be installed.
The issue of school and yard is a very topical one at this point in time. The Canadian government has been very
We'll get back to that article in just a bit. Well, the Canadian government has contributed 300,000 EC dollars to the National Office of Disaster Services in support of the rebuilding program underway in Barbuda. During a signing ceremony at NOD's American Road headquarters this afternoon, Canadian High Commissioner to Barbados and the OECS, Marie Legault, says Canada was among the first to have responded to the needs of Barbuda and other islands within the region that were impacted by Hurricanes Irma and Maria. She noted that Canada, which has pledged millions of dollars in aid, has and will continue to play its part in bringing relief to those who need it in large and small ways, and though it was and still is an unfortunate period for the affected countries, the devastation caught the world's attention.
In a way, you know, when I reflect on what happened in September, both with Irma and with Maria, I reflect that in a kind of twisted way, something good came out of it. Because after that, the whole world became centered around what's happening in the Caribbean. And I think this is actually quite positive because a lot of it has come out of lot has come out of it, and has really put the attention on the issues around small island development states and climate change impact. It certainly has for us in Canada, and we have been there to respond right away.
This latest contribution by the Canadians is to aid in food and reconstruction.
In discussions with Mr. Mullen and NOD's team right after the hurricane, we also came up with what were some of the priorities for the evacuees, the Barbudan evacuees, and this is why we're here today, to sign the package of 50,000 Canadian dollars or 100,000 EC dollars to help with food products, to help with Barbudans evacuees. In addition to that, pending a few documents that we need to finalize, we will also support to the amount of 200,000 EC dollars or 100,000 Canadian dollars for the reconstruction and rehabilitation of the Barbudan Council buildings and potentially school if that can fit.
Director of NODS, Fillmore Mullen, expressed appreciation for the continued assistance from Canada.
The Canadian government has been very helpful, not just to Antigua but to the region, not just to Irma, but when you look at the disaster management program across the region, Canada has always been one to examine, verify, and provide support. And sometimes when you get to the stage where the support is critical, the Canadians are a very reliable partner. But specific to the impact and Barbuda, we want to thank you for the contributions made so far and look forward to the completion of those in the pipeline so that we can have additional resources to stabilize the response as it's ongoing.
That's the Director of NODS, Fillmore Mullen. Going back to that earlier article we told you about, that the National Office of Disaster Services taken steps to prevent stealing of hurricane relief items at its headquarters. Last weekend, following a routine inspection of the hurricane relief items donated to the government of Antigua and Barbuda, a number of items were discovered missing from the storage facility on American Road. Subsequently, the ministry conducted an investigation which resulted in 2 individuals being arrested and charged by police. To prevent a recurrence, Director Fillmore Mullen says surveillance equipment will be installed.
We've engaged a private contractor to supply us with a quotation for security cameras, and we've been given authorization to engage to install those as soon as possible. The system as it exists operates on trust. If you have people working in humanitarian assistance to victims of disasters and you can't trust them, then you have a problem. No system is foolproof. And it's only a matter of time before someone finds a loophole. The challenge is when you find those breaches, what do you do with them? I also indicated that there are a fundamental problem with relief supplies in that you get things, there is no list of what was sent. And so you have to go through a process of inventorying these things on arrival. Unfortunately, the inventory starts when they get to the warehouse. And so between the ports and the warehouse, we call that an opportunity for things to go wrong.
Both men were employees of NODS, one a manager of the warehouse and the other a driver warehouse assistant. They were granted bail in the St. John's Magistrates Court earlier this week. Antigua and Barbuda's passport has been ranked 31 in the Henley and Partners Passport Index for 2018 for the world's most powerful passports. The ranking was released on Tuesday, and Antigua and Barbuda has slipped 1 place. In 2017, the country's passport was at number 30. But visa restrictions imposed on Antigua and Barbuda by Canada is believed to be responsible for the decline to number 31. Antigua and Barbuda passport holders have visa-free access to 135 countries. For the countries within the region, St. Kitts and Nevis is ranked at 28, St. Vincent and the Grenadines 35, St. Lucia 34, Barbados 24, Grenada 36, Trinidad and Tobago 33, and Dominica is ranked at 38. The Henley and Partners Passport Index lists Germany for the second year in a row as the country with the world's most powerful passport. Singapore is at number 2. The UK at number 3, along with Japan, Norway and Sweden. Ranked at number 4 are Austria, Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Spain and Switzerland. The United States is ranked at number 5 and Canada at number 6. The Democratic National Alliance has revealed another candidate that will contest the upcoming general election constitutionally due in 2019. Leon Smith was unveiled last evening as the party's choice for the constituency of All Saints West. Smith, a career civil servant, retired as the airdrome superintendent at VisiBird International Airport and now spends his time as a farmer. Speaking at last evening's launch, Abley, as he is popularly known, describes himself as an ordinary citizen who wants the best for his nation.
Now, dear citizens of All Saints West, and by extension, citizens and residents of Antigua and Barbuda, you have seen and experienced the dilemma and perennial problems which continue to confront us as a nation. If we do not complete this revolution and vote for a dynamic, new, and all-inclusive party like the DNA, our country will continue to experience the rapid social and economic failures which will destroy completely our ambitions, our achievements, and the very soul of the nation. It is time for people to put an end to political immaturity, disrespect of citizens and residents, chronic economic failure, social mismanagement, and spur-of-the-moment and ad hoc plans, which has passed for governance for too long. We must change that.
That's the DNA's newest candidate, Leon Abley Smith. The party has indicated its intention to field candidates in every constituency ahead of the next general elections. That's a look at national developments this Thursday evening. Antigua and Barbuda is to establish a sexual offences court, the first of its kind in the OECS, and the chief magistrate dismisses a newspaper article which he says contains inaccuracies, and a $90 million port modernization project is to begin next week. Stay tuned, we'll be back with regional and international developments. Thank you so much for staying with us. It is 9 minutes on the hour of 7 o'clock evening time in Antigua, Barbuda, and the rest of the Caribbean. The United States yesterday categorized Jamaica as level 2 on its new travel advisory scale, warning Americans to exercise increased caution when traveling to the island due to the high crime rate. The advisory, posted on the U.S. State Department's website, said violent crimes such as home invasions, armed robberies, homicide and sexual assaults occur frequently, even at all-inclusive resorts, and Jamaican police lack the resources to respond effectively to serious criminal incidents. Americans were advised not to travel to some areas of Kingston, Montego Bay, St. James, and Spanish Town, St. Catherine. In Kingston, the State Department said violence and shootings occur regularly and prohibited travel to downtown Kingston, which it defined as the areas between Mountain View Avenue and Hagley Park Road and south of Halfway Tree and Old Hope Roads. It also includes Trenchtown, Tivoli Gardens, Arnett Gardens, Grants Pen, Cassava Peace and Standpipe, which is located just across from the U.S. Embassy in Kingston. For U.S. government personnel, travel is prohibited to Spanish Town and the following areas: Montego Bay Flankers, Canterbury, Norwood, Rose Heights, Claver Street and Hart Street. They are also prohibited from driving outside of Kingston at night, the U.S. State Department said in its advisory. The new travel advisory scale ranks countries from 1 to 4 on safety and risk factors. Hurricane-ravaged Puerto Rico on Wednesday launched a new drive to become the 51st U.S. state, with the island's governor demanding an end to second-class treatment of its citizens. Puerto Rico's more than 3 million residents are U.S. citizens with no obstacles to living and working on the mainland. Yet, the U.S. Commonwealth in the Caribbean has just a non-voting delegation in the U.S. Congress in Washington, and Puerto Rico residents cannot vote for a U.S. president. In June, Puerto Ricans voted overwhelmingly to embrace statehood in a non-binding referendum, but turnout was extremely low. The island, which is grappling with public debt of $73 billion and a stuttering economy, was devastated by Hurricane Maria in mid-September. Authorities are still struggling to restore power and clean drinking water to all citizens, and many homes and businesses need to be rebuilt. Congress ultimately decides whether or not to grant statehood. Puerto Rico has chosen a shadow congressional delegation of 5 representatives and 2 senators to demand recognition in Washington and lobby for statehood. Well, Trinidad and Tobago's opposition leader Kamla Persad-Bissessar is urging Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley to man up to his responsibilities as the Prime Minister and stop the blame game. This as the Prime Minister pointed fingers at the opposition for the spiraling crime problem because it did not support the anti-gang legislation. Rowley said the killing of a 15-year-old and a taxi driver were yet another example of lawlessness of the worst kind carried out by groups of persons who come together to plan and execute heinous violent acts against the rest of society. He said the UNC have by their actions deliberately and by their words deceitfully refused to help the country to carry the fight to the wicked, violent and miscreant minority. The anti-gang legislation was defeated in the House of Representatives last December. The legislation, if enacted, makes gang activity illegal. In developments now internationally, European powers have urged the United States not to abandon the 2015 agreement with Iran that limits its nuclear program, saying it is making the world safer. After meeting his Iranian, French, German and EU counterparts in Brussels, UK Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson insisted the deal was preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. He also challenged Washington to come up with a better alternative. U.S. President Donald Trump wants to amend the deal or withdraw from it. In October, he refused to rectify for Congress that Iran was complying, accusing it of not living up to the spirit of the agreement. At a news conference after meeting Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif on Thursday, representatives of the European Union, the United Kingdom, France and Germany reiterated their support for the nuclear deal they helped negotiate. The Ecuadorian government has confirmed that Julian Assange was granted Ecuadorian citizenship on December 12. Ecuador subsequently asked the United Kingdom to recognize Mr. Assange as a diplomatic agent, a move that could have given him immunity. The UK has refused, saying Mr. Assange, who has been at the embassy since 2012, should now leave and face justice. He had been wanted on assault claims in Sweden, which have been dropped, but now fares extradition to the United States. Mr. Assange, 46, breached bail conditions when he sought political refuge at the Ecuadorian embassy while facing sexual assault allegations in Sweden. Prosecutors there dropped the allegations in May of 2017. However, UK police say he will be arrested if he leaves the embassy in Knightsbridge for failing to surrender to the court in 2012. That's a roundup of regional and international developments. Stay tuned to what the report is next. The weather report has brought us to the end of Point FM's nightly news for Thursday, 11th January 2018. Just before we go, a recap of the headlines that made the news. Antigua and Barbuda is to establish a sexual offences court, the first of its kind in the OECS. The Chief Magistrate dismisses a newspaper article which she claims contains inaccuracies. And the $90 million port modernization project is set to begin next Monday. Within the region, the U.S. categorizes Jamaica as a Category 2 on its travel advisory scale. And European powers have urged the U.S. not to abandon a 2015 agreement with Iran that limits its nuclear program. We thank you so much for joining us. On behalf of all of us here at Point FM, I am Phil George, wishing you a pleasant evening, and be sure to join me again tomorrow. Goodbye.